everybody. This is Brian, and Michelle's behind the camera today, and we are cruising with the Colemans. We wanted to take a couple of minutes to show you one of our most popular recipes on our blog site. It is a traditional Spanish recipe that we found while we were walking the Camino de Santiago, both times that we were in Spain in 2017 and in 2019. Now we've kind of taken the Spanish version of it and we've changed it up a little bit. Normally this is called Tarta de Abuelo, and it is a traditional refrigerator cake. Ours is called Tarta de Abuela Borracho, which means cake of your drunk grandmother. So you'll see why she's drunk in a couple of minutes. So it's actually not nearly as scary as it looks. It's really easy to make. There are some shortcuts you could make that I'll talk about as we go. But we're going to start out by making a homemade custard. So the first thing I have here is 4 cups of milk that I'm putting in a saucepan, and I'm adding to that a couple of sticks of real cinnamon. Now these are kind of small ones, so I'm going to put 3 of them in here because I want a lot of cinnamon flavor. If you have a bigger stick, you might only use 1 or maybe even 2. And I'm going to put this on the stove. And yes, we are in our RV. So this is campfire cooking at its best today. So I'm going to put this on a nice low heat and give it plenty of time to warm up and come to just barely a simmer. So what I'm looking for is for some steam to start coming off of it, some bubbles around the edge, but no more than that. As soon as it gets to that point, I'm going to take it back off the heat. Now the next thing I'm going to do here is I have 4 egg yolks that I've already separated from their whites because I don't need the whites. So I guess you could make a healthy omelet with those if you wanted to. And I'm going to take 1/4 cup of cornstarch, and I'm going to take 1 cup of sugar. Now, I said that there were some shortcuts that you could do. If you wanted to do this with an instant pudding, you could use just regular old store-bought instant pudding, make that up and let it get set up. And you could use a vanilla pudding, or you could use, if you could find it, a butterscotch, or if you could find a cinnamon pudding, that would be even better. Much more traditional flavor, but super easy. So we're going to mix this together with a whisk, and it's going to be really thick and pasty. As you can see here, it looks pretty gross. And I'm going to get a spatula out of here so I can kind of scrape it out, because I'm going to add most of that milk into this mixture, and I want it to be plenty thick because of the other ingredients we're going to be adding. So I'm starting off with this mixture that's very, very thick. I'm just going to get it well incorporated, and that's the first step. All right, for the next step, we're going to start making our chocolate ganache for the ganache layers of the Tarta de Abuelo. So I've got 4 tablespoons of butter, and I'm adding to that 1/2 cup of heavy whipping cream. By the way, we're cooking just like Grandma cooked. So that milk we used was whole milk. It was not a low-fat milk. The cream we're using is a heavy whipping cream. And try to find a brand that doesn't have any additives, that's just cream. Sometimes they have other things in them to thicken them. And the butter we're using is full-fat butter. This just tastes better with real ingredients that are the full flavor value versions of them. So I'm 4 tablespoons of butter, 1/2 cup of whipping cream. I'm going to put that on the stove and let it the butter melt and come to temperature, get warm, and then I'm going to add to that 1 cup of chocolate chips and just stir them in until they're melted.
Is this a labor-intensive dessert?
It's not a really labor-intensive dessert. It's going to take about a ½ hour or so to put together, and then it needs to sit in the refrigerator for a couple of hours at minimum, but it works really well if you let it sit overnight also. All right, so our cream and milk are almost up to temperature, so we're ready to proceed with the next step. First of all, we love to cook with wine here with Cruisin with the Colemans. Sometimes we even put it in the food. So here's to drunk
Cheers.
grandma.
These are camping safe glasses. Yes, I know some of you have glass. We have not upgraded.
All right, so the first thing we're going to do is take our butter and heavy cream, and I'm going to add to that 1 cup of chocolate chips.
Tell us about the chocolate chips you use.
We like to use a 60% bittersweet chocolate. This is the Ghirardelli brand. It's our go-to favorite brand. So, hey, Ghirardelli, if you're watching, send us some chocolate. We would love some. We use it all the time.
All the time.
So I'm just going to stir that in, and the milk should be plenty hot enough. It just barely came up to a simmer. So I'm just going to keep stirring it until it's all melted together. And then we're gonna let that kind of start to cool off. I'm not cooling it, I'm not putting it in the refrigerator because I need for it to still be spreadable and pourable when we start layering the cake. But you can see it comes together pretty fast.
Yeah, it does.
Now I'll just let that sit here for a minute while I do the next step, and then I'll give it another whisk or two just to get it incorporated. All right.
Now the whole RV smells like chocolate.
Oh,
it's great.
Sounds awful. So next up, I've got my 4 cups of milk. I'm gonna pour about a cup of that here into my measuring cup without making too much of a mess, hopefully.
And your camera woman will do her best to capture it.
So there we go. I've got about a cup of milk there. That's hot milk. It's of course been infused with all of that cinnamon. Oh, let's turn some of these burners off. I need that one, so I'm gonna leave it on. I've got a spoon here. We're gonna fish out those cinnamon sticks. And for the moment, I'm just gonna throw them in there so maybe they continue giving that milk a little bit of flavor. Oh, I'll find that other one in a minute. All right, now I'm gonna pour just a small amount of this milk into the eggs. This is important. If the milk is too hot, it's gonna cook the eggs, so we don't want that. So I'm really just pouring in a very small amount, maybe a quarter of a cup or so. And I'm gonna mix that in just to start loosening up this egg and custard mixture. This was the egg and cornstarch and sugar.
And then you put it back on the burner? No.
Nope, I'm gonna keep getting it mixed in here until I've got about half of the milk mixed in.
Gotcha.
And again, the key is to not do this too fast because the last thing in the world I want right now is scrambled eggs.
That would be bad.
Cinnamon sugar scrambled eggs. Maybe there's a recipe in there somewhere. I don't know. Sounds kind of gross. Now I'm going to put in another little bit more milk this time. I think we've now got enough of the hot milk incorporated in that we are safe from scrambling our eggs. And I don't see any chunks or pieces. If you do, I would just start over, but you might be able to run it through a sieve if you started to get some scrambled egg and scramble that out. Now, we're gonna take this back to my low heat, and I'm just gonna pour it in and whisk it in. Whoops. Hey, I'm not cooking unless I'm making a mess.
This is true.
All right. So now this is just gonna sit on the lowest your stove will go for a few minutes, just to kind of let it come back to temperature. And then I'll turn it up a little bit, and I'm gonna just kind of keep whisking this until it becomes a very thick custard.
Inquiring minds want to know what's in the crock pot. I know if you're me and you're watching this, you want to know.
Well, come over here. The crock pot, we're having some friends meet us tonight to camp tonight. And this is another one of our recipes. This is our beef short rib and mushroom risotto. The link is in the description for the recipe. We don't have a video for this one. Maybe we'll make a video for that eventually.
Oh, it's so good.
It is amazing.
So good.
All right, so our custard has thickened up, and you want it to be about a pudding consistency, maybe a little thick. It's gonna get thicker as it cools, but because we're about to add some liquor to it, we want it to be thick because otherwise it'll end up too thin in the end, and then the whole thing kind of falls apart. Now, normally we would use orujo tostada in this. That is a grape spirit that's distilled, that's very, very common all over Spain. The tostada is aged in barrels, and then it is sweetened, and it has kind of a caramely flavor to it. I don't know how to get that in the United States, so short of buying a plane ticket and going back to Spain, I'm not sure how to get any orujo here.
If you do know, leave it in the comments. We want to know.
Yeah, I would love to get some more orujo. So you can use any number of liqueurs that you would love. This is a caramel Bailey's Irish cream. You could use a caramel or a butterscotch vodka, or even a butterscotch schnapps would be good. If you want to go without alcohol, you could just add some vanilla extract here, probably about 2 teaspoons. You could also use an almond extract, or an orange extract would probably be really good with the chocolate. So whatever flavor you love, you could add in. If you don't like the caramel here, you could add some other flavor of liquor also. It's drunk grandma, it's whatever she's drinking, right? So I'm just gonna add that in. I'm not cooking it anymore, so the alcohol isn't really going to cook out. But when you consider that it's being spread over this whole recipe, it's really not very much alcohol. That was a half cup, by the way. So now I'm just gonna incorporate that in. And I did find that other cinnamon stick and I fished it out, so it's not in there anymore. Oh, it smells so good. All right.
It's not smell-o-vision, sorry.
It is not, but that heat got a little bit of that caramel smell coming out at me. All right, now it's time to assemble the cake. In the recipe that I posted, I say to put the whole thing together in a 9x9 brownie pan. Here in the RV, I don't have a 9x9 brownie pan, so I'm just using a regular cake pan or a loaf pan. If you have a pretty serving dish of some sort, that'd be good too. But you know, in the RV, we have functional. We don't necessarily keep a lot of extra pretty things on hand. Now, to assemble the cake, I need graham crackers. And Michelle's gluten-free, so we use Pamela's gluten-free honey grams. This is one of our favorite brands. Pamela's, great brand. If you don't need to be gluten-free, you could use regular graham crackers. You could use shortbread cookies, would be delicious in this. Or you could even use like lady fingers, almost like a tiramisu. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take these cookies, and I've already measured out how many will fit in a layer in my pan. So I'm just gonna kind of drop them down here into the milk and let them soak up a little bit of milk. You can't let them sit for long or they will fall apart. We're just trying to get them a little bit moist.
It's one of the reasons we like the Pamelas, because they're nice and thick. So for me, they're not good for s'mores because there's too much graham cracker, but it works really nice in this recipe.
So just kind of getting them a little happy in this cinnamon milk and creating a little layer down here in my pan. Turn that one around so it fits a little bit better.
Because not all graham crackers break the same.
No, they don't. The only problem with the Pamelas is that they are always really broken up in the box. All right.
That's not Pamela's fault.
No, probably not. That's probably the grocery store's fault. So a little bit of milk in there. If I wanted to, I could even just drizzle a little bit more milk on to let that soak in. But the fact that these cookies are thick and a little bit dry is another reason and another thing that's going to help take some of the liquid out of the custard, because they're going to absorb as they sit. Now I'm going to add to this about a third of my custard mixture.
It's more than just what can cover it, really. It's
spread. Yeah, you want a decent layer.
That looks so good.
Maybe just a tiny bit more. Next layer, I'll try to face that towards you so you can see better. Now I'm going to take another layer of graham crackers. And one thing that's important in the layering, I like to try to, so I put the halves on this side. This time I'm going to put the halves over on this side. I feel like that's important because it just helps the cake hold together better as you're cutting it. If you alternate where your open pieces of graham cracker are. Okay. Now the next layer is some chocolate. So I'm going to use about a third or so of my chocolate. Now if I were doing, so I did the full recipe, but I'm using a smaller pan. So I'm gonna have a little leftover chocolate and I'm gonna have a little leftover
we can
custard.
Dip graham crackers into them.
The chocolate is great for dipping strawberries or other fresh fruit, marshmallows, just dipping graham crackers. So there you can see, I'm just gonna kind of spread that out.
And we're adults, so we're not spoiling our dinner, right?
No. Hey, we're camping. We can start with dessert, can't we?
Sure.
All right, now we're gonna do right on top of the chocolate, another layer of graham crackers. So far our layers are graham cracker custard, graham cracker chocolate. Now I'm gonna do graham crackers again. That means next up is custard. So I'm just gonna pour that in. You can see that's already starting to thicken up a little bit.
There won't be that much left over.
Well, this pan is a little higher than a brownie pan, so I think I can make my layers a little thicker. So my layers may be a little thick this time. Usually the layers are pretty thin. A lot of times when we would be served this, as part of our pilgrim dinners, the whole cake would maybe only be about that thick. So the layers were very, very thin. I'm being a little bit more indulgent since I'm not serving a pilgrim's meal tonight, and that's only cost a few euro. All right, so that's my last custard layer. Now I'm going to do one more graham cracker layer. Now we're going to finish the whole thing off with a ganache layer. What do you think? Should we just use all the rest of the
I think we
ganache?
should just use it.
What do you think? Should we do it? Should we do it?
Oh my
Let's
gosh.
just do it.
I mean, I want a little bit to dip a graham cracker in, but...
Shell always gets to lick the spatula.
Yeah.
That's one of the perks of being the cameraman. You get to sample it.
Or the camera woman.
Or the camera woman. Now we're just going to spread that over. You do want to seal it. So make sure that that chocolate goes right up to the edges.
Why do you want to seal it?
It just helps keep it from getting a little funky. The custard, just like when you if you make pudding and you don't cover it up, the top gets that film on it, that skin. So we want to make sure it's totally sealed so we don't get any of that. Now we're going to put this in the refrigerator and let it sit in the fridge for at least 2 hours to get good and chilled so that everything sets up. It's even better to let it sit overnight, but it certainly doesn't need to. We're planning on eating this tonight. So we're gonna let it chill and then we'll show you cutting it open and eating it when we're all finished. Oh.
Yeah.
All right, so what are you taste testing?
I might be taste testing. Hold on.
So there's a little bit of custard.
I gotta make sure it all worked out well.
A little bit of chocolate.
Who needs to refrigerate for a couple hours?
We could just eat it right now.
Cheers. Thank you, drunk grandma.
All right, you've heard us say on YouTube before that one of the problems we have is that we always forget to videotape the food before we finish eating it. And we almost ran into that problem last night. By the time we got done with dinner and it was dessert, we kind of forgot to take video or pictures or anything. So fortunately, with 4 people last night, we only ate half the cake. So here it is. Now, by the way, I mentioned when we were making this that we made it kind of thick. Certainly thicker than what we normally would get it when we were in Spain. And you can see now how much it's thickened up.
That is heavenly.
So the thinner slices are definitely easier to slice and get out of the pan. It's kind of like lasagna. But you could also do this very much like banana pudding and just use a spoon and scoop it out, kind of like you would banana pudding style.
Yeah, it comes out a mess.
But yeah, it does not really come out very pretty. And that's my fault. The reason it's not coming out pretty is because that chocolate layer is too thick.
Oh.
And the custard layer is honestly a little thick. So a lot of times when we'd see this, you'd get a big square piece of it in Spain, and it would only be maybe this thick. So thinner layers with more cookie help it to actually slice up a little bit better. But this way, you get all of this deliciousness.
Yeah.
I mean, look at this. I'm gonna take a bite of this here, and the smell of the cinnamon and the graham crackers and the custard.
Ooh.
It's just really amazing, right, Michelle? There it is. Another trick to YouTube is make sure you keep the cameraman's mouth full, and then she can't criticize what you're doing and saying.
Nice, that's
Tarta
so
Abuela,
good.
the recipe is on.
Tarta de Abuela Borracho.
The recipe is on cruisinwiththecolemans.com, and there's a link in the description below. So hopefully, if you make it, let us know in the comments how it turns out for you. Maybe what flavors you decided to add to yours.